Now my one-page report, because it's been rewritten, is now like 6 pages with these long, convoluted paragraphs and whatever. But I'm like, if this is what they want and they're my bosses, I'll send it. Send it to the FDA. I get the phone call. Did you do?
Hello and welcome back to the Ignition Path Podcast. I'm so glad you can make it to this episode. I've got Kimberly Wallbank on with me today from Quality System Services, and she's got a great story about how the corporate world is no longer her thing and how she has generated something inside of what she knew and what she had going for her in that corporate world that just wasn't really, acknowledged and recognized, and what she did about it. So I can't wait for her to share your story. There could be people out there with the exact same story wondering what to do, and Kimberly can be that answer for you. So Kimberly, welcome to Ignition Path Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kyle, for having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on. So real quick, just in a nutshell, go ahead and share. I mentioned I kind of teased the whole corporate thing. I've been in corporate myself and didn't do great in it. It was a lot more stress than I ever thought. I'm, as most people know on this podcast that listen to it, I'm a full-time paramedic, and I save lives for a living. And then when I went to the corporate world, I had stress, and they're like, "Wait,
yes.
What? It's not stressful to save someone's life." I'm like, "It's different. I mean, it's stressful, but it's not the same type of stress. Like there's no long hours. You deal with what you got to deal with in the moment, and then when it's over, it's over, and you may have some post-traumatic stuff that you have to deal with, but we have tools for that nowadays to help us cope with that. But when it comes to the corporate world, and what I found is that there was just through corporate sabotage, through people that are taking your ideas and running with them as calling them their own. I know that you have a story about that. So share with us, where you came from. Ignition Path Podcast is all about the path that got you to the entrepreneurial stage. So tell us about those days and then how you got into this part of your life now with the entrepreneurial stage.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. So I have a biology degree in bachelor's. From Marquette University, and I, back in 97, started working in corporate medical devices, working on vitro diagnostics. And so what I did at the time was, it was a great job starting out, 21 years old, learning how to do manufacturing, quality control testing, process validation, how to write an investigation if something went wrong. And I was working on products I was proud of because they were tests to determine whether or not you were in the right therapeutic range for the drugs you were taking for cardiac issues. So even though I didn't have, everyone says, "Oh, I have a family member take it." I didn't have any of that, but it was, to me, an important work. It was important work to be doing. I am very good at organizing myself and managing my time. However, when you're wearing that many hats and everything's a priority, after 2.5 years, I was pulling my hair out, like, please, I need to go somewhere else.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to have a supervisor at the time who was like, "You know what, you are fantastic at figuring out puzzles, figuring out and writing reports and getting people to understand them." And this particular company ended up going under consent decree. And they were looking for people to go help. Now, a consent decree, for those who don't know, is when you're in real big trouble. So this company happened to be in trouble with the FDA. It was a court injunction. So a judge had to sign off. There was a big fine. And they had to remediate parts of their processes, which in pharma and medical device are called quality systems.
Okay.
So I went and worked under this incredible supervisor who was also a taskmaster, but she was one of those where if you did your job and you were passionate about what you were doing, she'd help you out regardless. And I got to help people. I got to help people on the manufacturing line who were having difficulties filling out documentation. In our industry, they're called batch records. So as you're making the product, you're filling out certain fields, you're getting information from the equipment. And it was very helpful from coming from the position I was in, because I was that person who was on the line making making products. And now all of a sudden you have someone else coming in to evaluate you. And so finding a way to talk to them and communicate with, we're here to help you and try to find what's causing the mistakes. And, once you kind of talked to them that way and understood, you were asking questions to understand what they were doing because they were the experts, information would flow. Like, for example, they're like, I have to fill out, when I'm at this stage of the process, I got to fill out a field on page 2, another field on page 24, and then I have to go back to page 5 and then sign 3 things. So I'm flipping through. Meanwhile, things are still moving on the line. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. We need to reorder things.
Right.
Logic. Okay. So a lot of it was logic. But it was one of the first times I learned it's easier when an outsider comes in, gets the information together, and can put the why and why this is important to fix. Particularly when management management sees things in dollars. So did that for a while, but then I got my dream job. Got my favorite. I've always wanted to be an R&D scientist.
Okay.
When I mean always, I was originally, my goal out of high school and my first few years of college was to be a doctor. But when I realized that wasn't really the right path for me, I wanted to be a research scientist. So got my first job in R&D, absolutely loved it. Felt part of a team. I've had a manager, supervisor who was very understanding, wanted to teach me. I wanted to learn from him. Unfortunately, project was canceled due to funding. They moved me over to another R&D project where it was much bigger, and I ended up, because I only had a bachelor's, ended up being for a corporate term for us, a lab rat for 5 PhDs. So imagine, it was, to put it in Disney terms, it was like being Cinderella with a bunch of stepsisters telling you what to do, and none of them were on the same page. So, and all of it had to be done right now. Okay. So yeah, it's one of the reasons why a lot of my clients like me, because I go to these analogies that anyone can relate to.
Well, and I just got back from Disney, so I can relate to that.
I actually said to a VP for one of my clients one time, because he said something to me of, our goal is to get rid of you. And because I'm a consultant, right? I'm a consultant to fix problems. If the problem gets fixed, the goal is to fix the problem, which means ultimately I go away. And he goes, I don't mean that. I like you. And I said, well, no, I'm kind of like Mary Poppins. I show up and you have a problem. I help you fix it. And I take my umbrella and I fly away. And he's like, yeah, you are. And I left the room going, I just called myself Mary Poppins to a vice president of a major medical device company. Yeah. So I use analogies that, and that's the reason why a lot of people like it when I come in, to not only help them with their problems, but to also teach them to help implement things that are coming down the pipe.
Right.
So I got to the point in this part of my career where people were taking my ideas. Not only taking my ideas, but turning them into their own. And it's one thing when your manager says, my team came up with this, and they get credit for it. They are the manager of the team. That's fine. But when your name is taken off and not even included in the launch party, or even considered to being listed on the patent, but the guy who showed up for that one lunch, who, because there was pizza in the room, sat down, had a slice of pizza and left, his name ended up on the patent. It's, So I've had those kind of horror stories. I decided at this point I liked quality, because I realized that, look, I wanted to get a PhD, but it was like, you know what, based on my lifestyle and everything else, it wasn't going to happen. And I wanted a graduate level degree. So I said, I'll get an MBA, but I really did like quality. I liked giving that help to the scientists and the manufacturing techs that I wish I had had when I was a scientist and a manufacturing tech. So I moved over to pharmaceuticals, to a company that also had a consent decree. And the interview process was very interesting, because I had a couple of people I interviewed with who were not interested at all in me being there. They're like, I actually had one manager I'd be supporting actually sit me down and say, I have no use for you. I have no use for this position. I don't know why you're here, but you have to be here for 20 minutes. So I'm going to sit here and read the paper. So he sat there and read the paper. And I was like, okay. But the vice president who was ultimately deciding when I was going to be there, I was able to explain how a consent decree worked because this was a clinical group that kind of they weren't officially part of the consent decree, but they had to meet a lot of the requirements in it because they were on the same site. And I was able to explain it to him and how the documentation works and how the regulations work with him. And he goes, can you start today? Like, and if the guy you'd be reporting to has a better candidate, I'm going to tell the quality team they need you. I'm like, okay. Like, sure. Like this is like 1,000 miles away from home. So I'm like, can't really start today.
Yeah.
Like,
I only brought one change of clothes.
I gotta like move,
right.
but so, and that is one of the things about corporate America. When you need to move, they do help you with relocation.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
so
that's true. That's true.
I got to play with puzzles in my, these regulatory puzzles of how to help this clinical group that manufactured and did quality control testing for clinical supplies meet their portion of these these rules that are coming down from corporate from this consent decree. And it was a struggle. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were plenty of people who were like, I'm not going to interest you. I'm going to sit and read the paper. But, when they saw that I came to bat for them, when other folks like, no, you have to follow this. I'm like, no, they don't, because this is not for commercial sale. What they're doing is actually creating methods to test clinical products. They're not even there yet.
Right.
So I was able to back and show I had their back on things. I then got a promotion and to another facility, which was really into the consent decree, became a full-blown manager and managed a group of QA professionals, and they were extremely professional and experts as far as I was concerned. They made it very easy to manage them because it wasn't even managing. It was more of this is where we're going today, like, everyone. We're going this direction. And they're like, okay, we're ready to go. And they knew their roles and did it. But we supported all lab efforts. So, and this is, again, in pharma. So if it was the micro lab, the chemistry lab, biochemistry, any sort of support they had from the technology groups, from metrology, who does all the equipment calibrations, we supported all of them. And the biggest struggle was because I saw them as our customers, is getting them to understand that I had multiple customers and had multiple priorities. So it was a great way for me to learn those strategies of managing multiple customers, multiple clients. And of course, it was an easy way because we're all one company. So how do you, okay, from the grand scheme of things for this product we're working on, which is ultimately the most important priority today? So did that for several years. Absolutely. I even feel bad calling them my team because it was a true team collaborative effort. All those people that worked on that team, it was just, I can't say enough good things about them. I occasionally sneak up on them on LinkedIn to see how they're doing, so because I'm always just so proud of them. And they taught me so many things. The biggest frustration, again, going back to corporate, because they were so amazing, was performance reviews. Now, I don't know about you, but I hated performance reviews. I'm a type A.
We all do.
I'm a type A. I grew up going to Catholic schools where, you can have all A's, but you got that B in gym or that B in penmanship. There was something, like, they're like, your daughter needs to work on this. So I was always, and because of how corporate puts their performance reviews, it's always that parabola, that bell-shaped curve of, you have to have, it's usually 1 to 5, you have to have more 3s than anything else. And so people who should be 5 sometimes end up being 4s or almost 3s because they can't have everyone be 5s. And So so besides me feeling like, oh my God, I did something wrong like a year and a half ago and I'm just hearing about it, but then it gets harped on because HR wants you to be continuously improving.
Right.
So you're constantly thinking about that one thing you did wrong. But then the other stressor was evaluating my team because unless I wanted to write unrealistic goals for them for the year, like literally completely impossible, the world would have to start rotating differently on the axis. The sun would have to come from the west and whatever. I had fours and fives every year. I mean, for everybody, because they would achieve and exceed what I was writing. But as it would go up the corporate ladder, because it had to meet a certain rule, that it was like my fours became threes and my fives became fours. And their answer was, well, we'll just give them a couple extra bucks. I'm like, these are people who are not, yeah, they want the money, but they're also motivated by the recognition of saying, hey, we saw your work and we appreciate it. And yes, we think it was great as well. So got in a little trouble with that a few times because I did not play with the company. I didn't take the company juice all that well. I actually had one employee come to me and say, I want to be promoted. And I was so proud of her. She's like, look, what do I need to do to get to the next level? So I was very honest with her of what I needed her to do, but with the understanding of I don't get to make the ultimate decision. I may be your direct boss, but my boss has to buy off on it, and their boss has to buy off on it, and then their boss has to buy off on it. I said, so if you do all these things, my promise to you is I will go to bat for you with this person. After that, I get no more say. And she was kind of like taken aback, but at the same time, she's like, I'm being honest with you. Like, I have no say after this. And that was heartbreaking. That was
Right.
really heartbreaking for me and heartbreaking for her. And I did get in trouble because I got called down to HR. I was like, why did you tell her? I'm being honest with my employees.
Because that's what you did to me last time.
Right. I mean, what am I supposed to say? Like, if you do all this, I'm going to give you, I'm going to consider you for a promotion and then not give it to her because 4 levels of management above me decided, because of budgetary reasons, because someone else just did better in their role, they get it. That's something I was being honest. She was being honest with me. I wanted to be honest with her. So I then I got laid off from that job, obviously. And then I went back to medical device as site quality head for a very small medical device company. Liked it at first, but then really started to see the writing on the walls. Like, this is just not for me. Quality, when it comes to pharma and medical device companies, quality is the last line of defense between manufacturing all the way to getting it to the consumer. And what I mean by that is not that everyone wants to do their job well and wants to do it right. It's that things happen. So when those things happen, quality needs to make that determination of whether or not to move forward with technical experts, or do we scrap it, or do we do any sort of rework? And I had management around me that the pressure was just a lot, was just way too much of, we need to get I said, and I was like, no, we can't. I don't have enough evidence, I don't have enough data. And they're like, but our sales. I'm like, our sales won't mean anything if we end up doing a recall.
Right.
Okay. Our sales will not mean anything for that.
Right.
And we had been bought out by a bigger firm. And it was helpful at first because at least I had some more higher level quality support. But I did end up doing a recall based on product that had been in the market prior to me showing up to this facility. And there was some determination of like, well, what do you mean you've never done a recall before? I said, that's a badge of honor for quality. Like, if you've been in quality, if you've been in pharmaceuticals and you can say, I've never had to do a recall. I mean, that's like winning the EGOT or a couple of Nobel Prizes. It's like you did your job so well, you didn't need a recall. So we so I had to learn a recall, which in a recall is time consuming besides being very expensive, particularly when your product has hazardous labels on it. Because now you're not only dealing with the FDA, you deal with the Department of Transportation. And if you don't want to be fined by the FDA, you sure as hell don't want to be fined by the Department of Transportation because they'll fine you for every hour you're out of compliance as opposed to every day. Yeah. So, well, again, you're crossing state lines and, you have a bigger chance of harming, civilians.
The ecosystem. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The ecosystem, everything else. So I wrote a report. I had to write a monthly report for the FDA. And I remember the person I talked to in the FDA, absolutely, at first she kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I was a little nervous about talking to her, and she was very much a bureaucrat. Very much my hours are 8 to 4:30, which means I leave at 4:30, which means I'm not answering the phone after 4:15 because I'm leaving at 4:30. Right. So she's like, okay, this is what you need, and go forward from here. I'm like, okay. So I wrote out the report, and I'm one of those, make it simple. Okay, make it simple. I don't want to give her any more information than she needs. She's, the FDA is asking for these 20 pieces of information. I'm going to give a paragraph saying this is the company, this is the product, here's the information that's requested per regulation, whatever. And I bullet pointed it out, signed it at the bottom. It ended up being 1 page. I got a call a couple days later. This is the best report I've ever seen. Can I use it at a conference? Like this, we want to show this as the gold standard. I get 20-page reports over just 20 bullet points. I don't need to hear agonizing, pining over these data points. I just need to know the data points. And I was like, okay, great. So again, thought I had won like the Olympics and, Nobel Prizes and, Oscars. And I was telling everybody like, we did this. And everyone was like, that's great. That's great. Okay. So, well, the corporate people then decided, well, we didn't get to see the report. You now need to show us your reports. All reports going to the FDA have to come through us now, including recalls. Okay. Next month, I send the report to them. They're like, you're missing information. You're missing all this information. Now my 1-page report, because it's been rewritten, is now like 6 pages with these long, convoluted paragraphs and whatever. But I'm like, if this is what they want and they're my bosses, I'll send it. Send it to the FDA. I get the phone call. Did you do?
From that lady.
Yeah. It was perfect the first time. Why did you decide to go back? And it was like, corporate told me I had to. And she goes, this is just insane. I'm like, yeah, it is. So it was another kind of like, the universe had kept telling me of
get out.
You need to get out. You need to get out. And I knew I eventually wanted out. For me, it was a timing issue. I was at this age, I want to say 33 at the time, and it just felt too early because I knew I wanted to consult. And I knew I wanted to be a quality consultant, helping with quality systems, quality assurance issues, regulatory issues. Because I'd worked with those consultants on those consent decrees, and I liked them. They were very helpful, knowledgeable. I learned a lot. They made sense. So I wanted to be one of them, but I felt that I needed more experience under my belt. And so I had left that job without having another job. And I was still looking for the next corporate job. And then one of these other consultants had called me and said, we have this big consent decree project up in New England. Can you help? Do you want to help with it? And I'm like, yeah. Do you think I'm ready? It was like, you've been ready for like 5-6 years. Like you're ready. Like you're ready.
You undercut just typical type A. You undercut yourself. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I knew this consultant thought very highly of me, but part of it was when he and some of the other consultants who I'd worked with were giving me the compliments. The way the compliments were coming off of was that, yeah, you should be running the show at this pharmaceutical company, this big pharmaceutical company. But then they would immediately say something like how they didn't like these other people. And it was like, oh, so is the bar set low? And I'm like walking over it, or, so it was unsure of how well those comments should have been taken. So that's when I started consulting. Most of my work is still subcontracted out to larger firms. Because a lot of the big pharma med device companies who get 43s warning letters, they typically prefer getting the bigger consulting firms out there because they've been established for 20, 30 years.
Gotcha.
They usually have a lot more bandwidth behind them. There's usually infrastructure around them a little bit more. And which was great because I got to learn a lot about how to manage myself as a consultant. And it also gave me a little more tools of how to talk to the clients, because this is also, it's not like I'm talking to another employee of the same company. I'm talking to a customer now. And maybe not the customer that hired me, but I still need to treat them with the same respect, and knowing that I am, I'm in their house. That's usually the term we use in consulting. Like, I'm in their house. I need to be respectful of their house.
That makes sense.
So there's that fine line of figuring out how to tell them, no, you are doing it wrong. This is why. And finding a tactful way to say that versus, we're going to tell the FDA and shut you down. Like, you never do that. But, it's one of those. So I've done many, many projects, whether it's been the real stringent projects where I've actually been like what they call an interim third-party QA, which means that the FDA has decided that they don't have any confidence in your quality assurance group. So while QA is getting their ducks in a row, they have someone like me come in and do the reviews behind them and say whether or not, yes, they did it right, so I'm going to sign off, or no, there's these additional issues you didn't think about. And a lot of times those are pushbacks because manufacturing told them, no, this is fine, or, the techs told, engineering told them it was okay. So it may have been a younger QA person who just didn't know. It was like, okay, well, they are the technical experts. I'm just going to sign off. And it was like, well, I get what they're saying, but it's not documented that way. So if you were to go, you QA, in front of the FDA to explain it, I don't think you can, because it's not written that way.
Gotcha. Well, that's, wow, what a path. I'm telling you, that's, you took just the years, how many years did you bang your head against the wall thinking, I need to be out, I need to be out?
About 13.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I was like maybe 13 days when I was like, I got to get out. Well, I was lucky enough to be able to go right back into the medical field because
Right.
I never left. I stayed part-time. So I just called my old boss up and like, you got a full-time spot for me? I'm like, this is not for me, man. I do not like this corporate life. So he's like, absolutely, come on back. So real quick, when it comes to this path that you have, so how many years now have you been your own consultant and your own boss?
14 years.
14 years. So you were in it for 13 years, and then now you've been your own boss for 14 years.
Yes.
So through that process, you've probably been you've had some ups and downs, I take it, and just like any entrepreneur, had some goods and bads. What would you say is like one of the most, what's the advice you would give to any entrepreneur out there listening to this that is either one, just starting a new fresh path that they needed to get to because of 13 years of banging their head against the wall,
Yeah.
and then what would be one advice that you could give to them to give them support through that process, or someone who's thinking about going into that, like what do you use your 14 years of your being your own boss and find one thing that you can tell them that they can focus on to get to a spot where is going to be more comfortable for them?
I think you kind of answered the question yourself, and it's have the right support system in place. It is very, very difficult to do this on your own. extremely difficult. Most of the consultants I work with are married or have retired from industry, and so they're doing this kind of part-time or just as an extra income. And when you're doing it, and this is kind of where that age fit in of was I ready, was not just am I educationally ready, am I financially ready to do this? And because I had been laid off, it just made me financially ready. Like I need to pay bills.
Sink or swim.
So because one of the things that happens a lot, particularly in pharma and med device, is when those two industries lay off, particularly lay off middle management or people in senior technical roles, they tend to go, I want to be a consultant now, because they get that, I don't want to do this, but they don't understand the costs, and not just the emotional cost, but the financial costs. You got to get all these insurances. You got to get our version of medical malpractice insurance,
Okay.
omissions and errors for your professional liability. You got to get business insurance. You're building a website. These things cost money, and they cost money to maintain. One of the things that helped me was, again, subcontracting myself out to larger firms, but they're always not going to guarantee you work. There's no guarantee of work. And so understanding that and understanding that cost, having that support system of people who understand what you're trying to do, respect your path, and can help you navigate some of these financial things, or be like, you know what, I'm going to be okay. If I'm not working for 3 months, I'm going to be okay. Or if I'm not working for 6 months, I'm going to be okay. But once that 7th month hits, I better be working. So I need to be, by month 2, be working to make sure these companies or myself are getting me my next client.
Right, right. So that's great advice. And, when it comes to what your biggest pain point is now that you've been into it for 14 years, like what is one of the toughest things that you're dealing with right now in your entrepreneurial, world? Like, because you're your own boss now, you do pretty much anything you want to do. So what would be your biggest thing that is facing you right now that stresses you out the most?
Mine right now is how slow the market is. So getting clients right now it's getting better. It is getting better. Since we got to August and now September, it's getting better. After the pandemic, there was a slight increase in work, and then all of a sudden it died out. It was like everyone had COVID fatigue. And if these companies are not able to get clinical trials approved or get them to be successful, meaning that they're showing, effectiveness and safety, they're laying off people, which means they're not hiring consultants to help them implement or remediate their quality systems. Because what they're trying to do is keep the people they have, so they're going to move them in those positions, kind of like what that other company did to me. So those tend to make it very difficult. I'm seeing the increase now a little bit. And what I mean by that is, like, it's slowly ramping up, like the discussions are happening.
Gotcha.
But getting the understanding of, just because you're at a discussion doesn't mean you have that contract.
Of course not.
And getting to that contract could take months.
Right.
Literally,
so not enough people
months
in the funnel for it to drip through properly. Right. Yeah.
Right. And
so you got to get in front of more people. Yeah.
And I've taken many I've done many coaching sessions with people, like how to be a consultant and how to be a coach. And a lot of them focus on business to customer as opposed to B2B, which is what I am.
Gotcha.
And they don't understand that with the regulations, the person who is hiring me is not necessarily the person signing off.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
And I may not be able,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, or the accountants or purchasing.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get to talk to them.
Yeah.
Now, some companies, they'll allow me to, they're like, oh, we need this form filled out. And I'll have a question, so they'll let me talk to them. But typically, I don't get to talk to them. It's literally the QA people who are hiring me, who want me on board. So I have to sell them and give them the tools to sell me down the line.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then now your food is
Right.
being put in someone else's hands, and you're like, no, that's not how I really want it to work. I faced that too when I was in medical sales. I remember one time everything was great. Everything went through. It was tens of thousands of dollars worth of durable medical equipment, and it got to the bean counter, and they called me up and they were like, "Who are you? You're not in our system." And I said, "Wait, what?" I said, I go in to see your people on a weekly basis. I've been working with them for months." And they're like, "Well, you're not in our system as a purchaser." I'm like, "Well, we're a small company." And go ahead and just call the director. I even actually used to work for you guys. I used to be a respiratory therapist at your hospital. So it's like, I'm pretty well known around there. Everybody knows who I am. Just call the director and call whoever else you need to call. And we're like, "Well, you can't come onto this campus until we get clarification." I'm like, "Oh, time out. Hold on a minute. I'm now a paramedic and I bring patients down to you guys. Am I restricted to come to your campus when I'm not in the medical sales, category?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, that's a different one." I'm like, "And by the way, I want your boss and I want your boss's boss and my boss are all going to get on a phone call together, because the way you're treating me right now is inappropriate, and we need to make sure we get this solved. And I'll do whatever you need me to do when it comes to putting me into your system, but you don't need to be." And it was way nastier than how I'm explaining it. I mean, it was one of those where I was like, "What?" I was off the phone like, "Wait a minute, what is going on here?" So that's an unfortunate situation when it comes to trying to get things in the funnel and then leaving it up to someone that is down the line to be your bread, to be your income for the next weeks or months or what have you. So now that we've talked about all that, go ahead and tell people how to find you. If people do. Now, I was just a little confused. Do you give consultation to others trying to do consultation? Or you have been coached before? Like, are you your own?
I have been coached before.
Okay, so I didn't know if you offered coaching services for someone that wanted to get into consultation.
No,
okay.
I don't.
I want to make sure we didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure. I'm like, well, we can call her up and ask her to give you pointers to become a consultant.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, I've been on other podcasts where I've discussed, the pros and cons of being my type of consultant, but no.
Okay. All right.
So there's three main things I offer. One is I will, and I'm going to go from the happiest to the saddest.
Okay.
So the happiest is the implementation. So helping a company implement a quality system or their entire quality system. So those tend to be your startups to your medium-sized companies who are like, we need a new training program. We don't like the way we're documenting our training. It's not working for us. We need help. Or, we don't like our complaint handling system. We want to buy a new software program. Help us. Or even my real joy is the startups, where they're like, we don't know what to do.
Right.
We need help. We've done all this work, put all this investment in. Help me. Okay.
Well, and that flashes back to what you used to love in your corporate side of things, was that generation, that support and that giving of all your knowledge, and then it's actually someone who wants it instead of someone that wants to just shove it aside.
Right. So that's one thing I do, is to implement. So it's not just them. Occasionally I'll get a larger company where there's a new regulation that came out. So it's, how do I meet it? So that I do as well. The other thing I do is remediate. So those are, you came out of a corporate audit, you came out of an internal audit, an FDA inspection, or I've even helped with EMEA issues, which is Europe, or even Health Canada, and you now need to fix it. Whether it's a comment from an inspector and auditor or a full-blown, for layman's terms, I'm going to call them a citation, but they're 483 forms, they're warning letters, those nasty things you can get from the government saying you didn't do this right. So helping them get through that, and that I do. I have a process that I go through to see where you currently are and what we need to do to tweak it. I don't go in saying we need to blow up the whole process and start from scratch without actually doing some sort of evaluation, because sometimes it's literally let's just change a couple of sentences and you're done. The other piece I will do is audit. I am a certified quality auditor, so I can come in and actually perform audits for your team. So if you want like a third party audit to say, hey, we're not feeling so good about our investigation program, let's bring someone in to take a look. I can come in and actually do a full-blown audit to help determine where it needs to be. I also, typically my auditing processes program is usually bought by smaller companies that have very, very small quality assurance groups.
Gotcha.
For example, I have one or two clients where their quality assurance, their organization's so small that QA is one person. Now, they cannot perform an internal audit on themselves.
Right.
So regulations actually say that you can't audit yourself. So anything that QA person owns has to be audited by someone else, and that's where I come in. They'll hire me to come in for a day or two to evaluate those processes that they own to do and to get that audit report for them to meet the regulation.
Wow. Okay.
And then I do speak at conferences.
Okay.
We'll do presentations at, meetings, stuff like that. But primarily, I implement remediating audit.
Awesome. And how can they find you? Is it a website or email? Like, I'll put all that. Of course, I'll put all that stuff in the comment section or in the show notes and all that. But
sure. So you can reach me at my website, which is qualitysystemservices.com. Systems and services are both plural. On there is a blog if you want to read some of my ramblings. Some of them are a little funny and tongue-in-cheek. Others are, hey, you're trying to write a standard operating procedure. Here's some things to think about.
Gotcha.
It does come out once a month. September's not up yet. I usually post middle of the month. But I've done things in there like comparing teams to Stanley Cup hockey champions. What does, they say it takes a village, but to be a great team, maybe you really need to be a Stanley Cup champion team. And here's why. So I go into, I'm a big hockey fan, so I kind of went into,
I love hockey, yeah.
So I kind of went into things and I poked fun at one particular team.
Oh, wait a second, though. Which team are you poking? Don't be poking fun at my team. What is it? Which team you poking fun at?
I poked fun at the Oilers.
Okay, good. All right. I was like, right now, do not kick us while we're down. We've lost one of our best, and
you know what?
And his brother, and we can't be kicked anymore right now.
I grew up in New England, and I watched him play, and I've met him once or twice at charity events, and I didn't get to meet his brother, but John was just an amazing man.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no real words to describe how wonderful he was.
Yeah, he's been very well received here in Columbus and well loved by the community. Yeah. And it shows even leaving Calgary like he did. It's one of those things where they loved him still. They didn't boo him when they came back. And they're just as hurt as all of us are. I mean, the whole hockey world right now is crushed. So, yeah.
Well, I think too how he left, he was very honest about why he was leaving, and it was leaving because he wanted to be in the same country as the rest of his family because the pandemic kept him away. And I think anybody who survived the pandemic could understand that logic.
Yeah.
It wasn't a money thing. It wasn't, I don't like the coach or the GM. It was legitimately, I want to be able to spend more time and see my family.
Yeah. So
I think anyone can relate to that. But yeah, I poke fun at the Oilers, particularly Connor McDavid.
Yes. Well, all right, we're on the same page now.
Yeah. So the logic in the whole thing is that just because you have the best player in the entire league doesn't mean you're the best team.
Yeah. Yep.
You're going to win as a team, not because you have this great guy. So
they came close. Woo. That was a heck of a series. But
Well, I wrote this blog. I wrote that one, I think, not last year, but the year before. But I keep posting it on LinkedIn, and I'm like, it's still relevant. Okay, maybe they'll do a little better. But I did not poke fun at the Blue Jackets. It was the Oilers.
Good.
But. You can also find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
My company has a page. I have a page. I post regularly on random topics that are in industry. Occasionally I do soapbox posts. which are me ranting about something I don't like in the world. For example, I ranted about, or I'm about to rant, I think it's one of the ones I have scheduled maybe, is those mass emails where everything is, hey, and then they insert your name.
Yeah.
It's like, you want my money? Could you at least not talk to me as if we've been
I'm a
best buds
robot.
since high
Yeah.
school?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At least say hi or dear, or, greetings, something a little more professional,
Right.
those types of things. But yes, I do some soapbox ones. I just did one, I didn't call it my soapbox post, but on education. I'm
Okay.
very big on, I went to Marquette. I'm very supportive, not as much financially as I'd like to be, but more volunteer wise, whether they like it or not. Um, they, in sharing what they need to start teaching
Mm.
students that are coming up that took my path.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I don't want them.
there's all kinds of stuff. I've had multiple guests on that. I mean, I had on my mental health podcast, I had a guest to come on who is in the mental health space, and she's now in the world, and they're like, it's completely different than what she was taught. And she said that's a problem because they didn't prepare me for the real world. And we've got to change the curriculum. So there's a lot of curriculum changes that have to be done. And I've got another person that is I'm his coach for podcasting, and he's going back to marketing school. And the big thing with him was he asked him before he chose what school, what are you teaching? What is your curriculum?
Right.
Do you have this, this, and this? Is this part of your teaching?
Yep.
And they're like, yes. And he's like, all right, I'll come and even talk to you to come to your school, because if you're teaching old stuff that's not relevant now, it's why do I want to come and waste 4 years just to have the employer teach me?
Right. I mean, my frustration was they taught, the biology program back in the 90s was, you're going to be a doctor or you're going to become a professor or a PhD research scientist. That was really what they were preparing you for. Or you were taking biology classes because you were a biomedical engineering student or a nursing student. Okay. So when my path changed from medical school and I couldn't afford or wasn't ready to go for a PhD, and I'm like, I want to go into industry. What does that look like? And you're talking to professors. Career services was sending me to sales, and I'm like, I am an introvert, like me in sales. Like, you want me to go, hey, look at this. I could not do that. I respect those people, but I just couldn't do it. There was it didn't prepare me to work in a lab after just getting my undergraduate degree.
Right.
And so my latest post, because a lot of universities just came back, and I've been doing a lot of cold calls with startups. And one of the things I share with them is, you don't need to hire me right now because you don't need me right now. But I'm telling you to save yourself time, energy, frustration, and just pure out pulling out your hair. Document everything and anything right now and explain why. Why did you do this? Why did you change from reagent A to reagent B? Why did you do that? And I'm talking to people who have PhDs who just graduated from Ivy League schools and these big schools. And they're like, I never thought about that. And it's like, how did they, and it was like, how are we still not preparing people of how to document these things?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a post about, this is important to teach how to write an experiment,
Right.
how to justify what you're doing. Because someone's going to ask you, whether it's now or 10 years from now. And the FDA is very good at asking you 5-10 years later.
Of course they are.
And what's not helpful is not only you not remembering, but maybe you're no longer with the company and now
Right.
someone else has to figure it out.
Yeah.
Or to go back to dollars and cents that managers and directors love to talk about, is there's an issue with the current process. They need to make a change. They don't know that you tried this other way before, so they're trying it now and it's backfiring. They just spent money.
Right.
Whether
Right.
it's $50 to $50 million to do something that has been tried before, and if it had been written down, kept somewhere, and had a justification with it, they would not have wasted that money.
Right. Well, you've heard it here first, everybody, on the Ignition Path podcast. Give Kimberly a call so you're not wasting money. There it is. There's the takeaway, everybody. So we're going to start. I used to tell everybody that we had little nuggets of information that came in. Ooh, that's another nugget. Well, I'm going to change the term. We're going to call it takeaways, because the software that I'm using actually captures takeaways after the conversation. And if I mention that it's a takeaway, it'll put it in there.
Okay.
so now I'm going to have like 6 takeaways because I just said takeaway 8 times. So,
Right.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on the Ignition Path podcast. Don't forget, everybody, to like, share, subscribe. Anytime you're listening to this and you need this to go to someone else that you may know, maybe a boss, maybe someone who's not doing quality control the right way with this episode, kick my episode over to them so they can hear Kimberly's message and all the information that she shared with us today. So, Kimberly, thanks so much for coming on the Ignition Path podcast, and hope the best of luck for you, and we'll get this posted shortly. Take care.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Ignition Path, fueling the entrepreneurial fire.